Hey everyone, and welcome to the ThermoWorks Demo Kitchen. I am Tim Robinson, Vice President of Marketing, and we are thrilled to have you here for another Thermapen 1 live cooking class, and we have a real treat in store for you tonight. Rose Levy Beranbaum. Rose Levy Beranbaum, she not only wrote the book on baking, she wrote the entire bookshelf on baking. But before I get into that, let me talk for just a minute about the Thermapen 1, which is the occasion for this class and the reason we've put all these cooking classes together. We've talked previously about the Thermapen 1's speed and the importance of allowing you to make sub-second decisions about your cooking processes. We've talked a little bit about its durability, but tonight I want to focus in a little bit on the importance of its accuracy. Accuracy, of course, is critical in everything that you're doing. You want to make sure that your measurements are accurate, whether you're building a house or whether you're cooking bread or whether you're smoking a brisket. You want to make sure that your measurements are accurate. But in particular, there are certain circumstances where a couple of degrees really can make a huge difference. And it happens to be that cakes are one of those areas where a couple of degrees in doneness difference can completely alter the formation of the structure of the cake or the dryness of the cake. This is true, of course, in other areas of cooking as well. Meats, a couple of degrees difference can mean the difference between medium and medium rare. If you're working with candy, of course, you've got your soft ball, your firm ball, your hard ball, your soft crack. Those are all just a couple of degrees apart. And so the accuracy, if you're working with a thermometer that has an accuracy spec of plus or minus 5 degrees, you literally can miss the entire target because of the accuracy spec of your instrument. So the fact that this is a sub-second response time, but also half a degree of accuracy, plus or minus 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit is the accuracy spec on the Thermapen 1, makes all the difference as you're moving quickly through whatever preparation it is that you're making. And that is particularly pertinent to tonight because we have something really special planned for you. When we first thought about making a series of classes, live cooking classes for people to celebrate the release of the Thermapen 1, one of the very first names that came to mind was Rose Levy Beranbaum, who's long been a friend of ThermoWorks. And I mentioned that she wrote the bookshelf. There's a little book called The Bread Bible, The Baking Bible, The Cake Bible. I believe there's a cookie Bible that's coming out. These are all literally the standards. The standards that everyone refers to in culinary school, wherever you go, everybody refers back to Rose's work because Rose's attention to detail is legendary. It not only set her apart, it actually created her career. Her attention to detail with things like the tempering of chocolate or the dough percentage that she talks about in her books. These very specific measurements that she makes really make the difference between a Rose Levy Beranbaum cookbook and somebody else's cookbook. I love a little story about Rose when she travels to teach cooking schools. She often brings with her a blue dot so she can measure the temperature of the oven because you go to somebody else's kitchen and you turn the oven to 350 degrees. How do you know what temperature is actually going on inside that oven? Well, she sets it up on her phone and she sees the graph and the blue dot tells her exactly what the temperatures are so she can make allowances in the adjustment of that knob to get just precisely the result she's looking for, whether it's a genoise or a chiffon or an angel food, all the different types of cakes. Tonight, she's got something really special planned for you, Molten Lava Cake. This is not the recipe, I believe, that she's put out previously that it has a ganache in the center. This is actually a molten, I'll let her tell the story, but it's a remarkable cake. All I can tell you is I've tried it. I've fed it to my family. It's unbelievable. And you are going to be able to feed it to your family. And I can't wait for you to have this experience. And so it's a thrill of mine to introduce a personal friend, Rose Levy Beranbaum. Take it away, Rose.
Thank you, Tim. I'm soul of baking. And it goes back 35 years ago when I was writing the Cake Bible, and I couldn't find an accurate thermometer. The only thermometers that were fairly accurate were for the human body, but you couldn't shake them up. I mean, they only went down, they didn't go up. So actually created my own thermometer with a company that was willing to have 2 points be accurate to within a degree. And now we have the Thermapen that's accurate to have a degree at every point. Anyway, this is the thermometer. Obviously, I couldn't carry it with me everywhere because it was quite large, but it was the only accurate thermometer I could find anywhere. When I took a class in Switzerland and I saw what they were using, it was from France and it had a metal cage that distorted the accuracy. And the chef even said, every time I get a new thermometer, I have to recalibrate it. But when you recalibrate, it may be accurate at one point, but not at another. So this was the frustration, especially when you were doing things like a buttercream that had to be exactly the right temperature, or it would fry the egg that you were beating it into, or the egg white. And even when it came to bread, people would say, you can tell it's done when you knock on it, and then it has to have a certain sound, like sound hollow. And I mean, I don't have perfect pitch. I never understood exactly the sound, but when you have a Thermapen, you just stick it in and you get it right. So now we have these wonderful new Thermapens that actually these came out relatively recently. My thermometer came out right before the Cake Bible, so that was 35 years ago. And then it became illegal to have a thermometer with mercury in the kitchen. And I was in despair because I thought it's the only thing that I can count on. And then along came ThermaWorks. So if you wonder why we're best friends, we have that deep connection because it makes such a difference. So when I discovered that there was this amazing new thermometer that was so speedy and also within half a degree of accuracy at every point, I just was dying for it to arrive. And here it is. I'm going to be doing a demo today that is, I think, the best really example of how important temperature is. I could have chosen one of my own recipes, but I chose a recipe that I always found to be difficult and untrustworthy because it depended on your oven and how long exactly you baked it. And it's the molten lava cake. And I think people know how to pronounce Jean-Georges Vongerichten because of this cake. It came about, I think, in 1987, right before the Cake Bible. And when I had it in a restaurant, I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever tasted because when you cut into it, there's this flow of chocolate. So I made the recipe. It was in all the magazines and it didn't flow at all. What I ended up doing was making a ganache ball and putting it in the center so that it'd be sure that it would flow, but that shouldn't be necessary. So when I got this new thermometer, I thought I'm going to nail it and get the exact right temperature. And there's actually 10-degree range of acceptability, but it always works every time. So we're going to start. Actually, because it takes 15 minutes to bake, I thought it'd be better to have the batter made ahead. And it's just such an easy recipe and so forgiving that you can even make it in the morning, refrigerate it, bring it to room temperature and pop it in the oven and have it for dessert, which is great for a dinner party. I actually start by having the chocolate the chocolate melted, and then I stir the butter in. But for speed, and because I happen to still have an oven that has a pilot light, I'm able to just put it in the night before and it melts perfectly together. But otherwise, in the instructions that I give, I just say to add the butter that's softened to very soft room temperature, and then stir it together. And what I'm using is 61% cacao chocolate. This happens to be Valrhona. I also love Guittard. And it's bittersweet chocolate. If you use a higher cacao content, it won't be quite as soft cake. And of course, it won't be as sweet either. So the butter is I like Organic Valley because it's cultured, but I'm not sure you can tell the difference when you have all that luscious chocolate in it. And now I'm putting it on a heat tray so that it stays warm. And I want to tell you about the different ingredients. Actually, first, I'm going to tell you about how I prepare the molds, which is always the first thing that I do. And that's, you can use anything like softened butter, but I use clarified butter because that gives you the most beautiful coating. And the clarified butter, well, it's not melted anymore, but even softened would work just fine. Or you can melt regular, any butter. And then the solids, the milk solids that tend to stick and make things stick, will drop to the bottom. And you can just use the upper part. It uses so very little. And then I like to use Wonder Flour because it's the softest, finest flour, but you can use any flour again. I just dust it in and then tap out any excess. And that way you'll have a perfect coating on your crust. The thing is, if it's not perfect, you can always dust it with powdered sugar, which I do anyway, because I like the way it looks. So this is going to be ready to fill with the batch that I make, but I'm going to put the one I made earlier today, which is all set. So it's filling 3/4 of the way up to the top. And I'll put it in the oven at 350. And I know in my oven, it always takes 16 minutes, but we're going to set the timer for 15 just to see and check what the thermometer is going to be saying. And if you forget to set the timer, that's okay too, because there is a sign of doneness. When it starts to deflate a little bit in the center, that's when it's perfect. And we're using, actually, this is the Thermapen, the ThermaWorks big, extra big and loud timer, and I can hear it 3 stories up. It really works. So now the ingredients. And it's simply 1 whole egg and 1 extra yolk. But unfortunately, these days, the proportion of yolk to white in an egg is much smaller than it used to be. So you're not ending up getting enough egg yolk, which is an important emulsifier and flavor. So what I do is I separate the egg and I weigh the whites and I weigh the yolks separately. And this, you can see maybe that, well, I always cover everything, but with yolks, if you do it ahead at all and refrigerate it, you really need to spray it with nonstick vegetable shortening, like Pam, because otherwise it will crust over. And you can see how I had to add extra because the 2 egg yolks were not what it normally would be, 36 to 38 grams. The white is 30 grams. And now I can just combine them, because the whole point was that I wanted to get the right amount of both the white and the yolk. That's the only reason I separated them. And to be honest, I'm showing you this because in other recipes, it really makes a difference. This recipe is so simple, it really would work fine even if you had less yolk and more white. I just want it to be perfect. So I have the flour, just a really small amount of flour, a tablespoon. It can be cake flour, it can be bleached or unbleached, all purpose, and just a pinch of salt. That's going to be just whisked together. Even if you put it in separately, it would be fine as well. And then it gets beaten. This is the sugar, just regular refined sugar. And the whole egg yolks. And of course, always be sure to scrape it all out, because that way you have the full amount, not what sticks there. Okay, and now I'm going to start beating. And I start slow, but then it comes up to high speed, 2 to 3 minutes, till it's really lighter in color and very, very thick. That gives it the best texture. You can do this in a stand mixer, you don't have to, or you can do it by hand even. And if you don't have the whisk beater attachment to a handheld, you just need to beat it longer. You see how yellow it is? You want it to get really pale. So while you probably can't hear me, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions which I can answer when I stop the beating. I can tell you another cute story about thermometers, but I don't know if you can hear me. I'll give it a try anyway. I actually created 2 thermometers. One was for working with syrups that had to go really high up, and the other one that was only 100 up to 120 degrees to work with chocolate. And I wanted the New York Times to write about it. So I met with Pierre Frenet, who was the writer of equipment at the time. And he said, exactly how many people do you think are going to buy a chocolate thermometer? And without even thinking, I said, well, about as many as will buy the refrigerated marble tops that you wrote about in last week's column. And he laughed and he said, well, my editor asked me to write about what's in my kitchen. He told me he would write about just one of the thermometers and which one should it be. And I said, then do the chocolate thermometer, because chocolate is one of the most temperamental when you're trying to temper it, if you don't want it to bloom afterwards and you don't want the temperature to go up too high, it needs to be accurate to a degree, or even a fraction of a degree. And it actually did quite well. I was selling my thermometers for about 15 years until it became illegal to have them in the kitchen. I have never broken one, but apparently that's the issue with mercury, that if it breaks and it's heated, it can be dangerous. So that's why I'm being very careful when I put this one inside. I mean, not that it's going to be heated, but see the difference in the color. And it's been beating now for, this mixer actually tells you how long it's beating. So, um, I've been beating it for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and I think I'm going to stop. I love the fact that it lights up so that you can actually see what's going on in the bowl. I could do this in the dark. So now this mixture of the flour, just a little bit of flour and salt, gets added on low speed, medium low, just until it's mixed in. That's all it needs. I'm going around to make sure it doesn't just all land on settle on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to unplug the heating tray, and I can take off the whisk beaters now. Now I'm going to add this to the chocolate, but I probably won't. I could use one of those beaters, but I'll use this whisk. I'm going to add, to see how it's airy and foamy. I'm going to add it to, let me get the other spatula. I'm going to add it to the melted chocolate and butter. And I usually start with a whisk because you'll see as I do it, it takes a while to blend the two together, and a whisk works really well to fold or mix two ingredients together. Let's see, I have 7 minutes left before I'm going to check, actually 8 minutes before I'm going to check whether the ones in the oven are done yet. They don't start rising until toward the end, and then they rise up to the top. And then, as I said, they deflate slightly and you see a dip in the center. Okay, if I start with the whisk, you'll see it really doesn't want to come together, and it looks like it's never going to, but in fact, it will come together beautifully. I can't tell you, once I discovered how easy this is to do, how many times we had it for dessert or had it as our lunch. And I like serving it with raspberry sauce or whipped cream or both. Raspberry and chocolate are a wonderful combination together. Okay, I'm going to put the spatula aside while I just finish a little bit more with the whisk. And if you've done a good job beating, it's going to come up almost to that ridge in the canister. Of course, you can use a Pyrex custard cup as well. But this really, it's fun to unmold. Well, I can't say it's fun to unmold. When you unmold it, it looks really good. But that's the only thing that's hard for me because I have relatively small hands. And you have to get a good grasp on the canister in order to get it to lift up well. You'll see in a moment. Okay, see how it's really coming together now? I often use the whisk instead of the spatula to fold two ingredients together. Okay. And now back to the spatula. And always reach, with any mixture, it's always important to reach to the bottom because things, always there's something that's going to settle a bit, which is why I don't pour all of it, half of it into one and then half in the other. I go back and forth, making sure they each have an equal amount of the same mixture. You don't actually have to have it on a sheet pan, but a little quarter sheet, but it's easier to transfer it in and out of the oven. Okay, let's start with this one. And since we already have these two for dessert tonight that are in the oven, these I'll put in the refrigerator, take it out an hour ahead of baking, and we'll have it for lunch tomorrow. Okay, now I'm going back to this one. You know, I actually, when I start off making this, I actually weighed the amount in each one, but it's totally unnecessary. You just want them to have a simpler amount so that one doesn't bake more than the other. I like to scrape it out pretty thoroughly because it's so delicious. I hate to leave any of the mixture behind. By the way, are there any questions? No. Okay. I had a feeling there wouldn't be because it's really such a simple recipe. The trick is in the temperature. Okay, I also like to use my French, they called it, when I studied at Le Notre years ago, they called it a corne, which is a horn. And the reason is because it was originally made out of a horn. This is very plastic. And it's great for making sure that you get up every last bit. Well, in a small bowl, this is kind of a little bit awkward to use. So, Woody, I'm going to hand this to you later so that you can finish up and not waste any of it or lick it. I mean, of course, you're not supposed to be eating raw eggs these days, but we don't always follow our rules. And thank you, Woody, by the way, because he's doing all the lighting, the videoing, zooming. This is my first YouTube Zoom, so we were a little bit worried about how exactly we'd set it up, but it seems to have worked perfectly. So here, I always cover everything because, you know, chocolate and butter absorb other flavors more readily than just about anything else. So if you don't have a separate refrigerator, then it's important to cover it really well. And now that's ready to refrigerate.
Okay, we have a question.
Oh, good.
Could you, can we see the question again, please? Okay, question is,
Yep.
if you use a higher percentage of chocolate with me and a higher percentage of cacao, instead of, let's say 63 to 70, what can happen?
That's exactly what I anticipated would be a question if there were one, because, you know, when I started off writing the Cake Bible, manufacturers wouldn't even say the percentage of cacao. And I had a hard time getting the information from Lynch. That was my chocolate of choice in those days. But that what happens is that a higher percentage of cacao means that there's less sugar. So not only is it less sweet, but it's heavier. It has more cocoa solids, it has more cocoa butter. And so since you're eating it warm, the extra cocoa butter would be melted nice. But if you were not, and it was room temperature, then it would be much heavier and more solid. It's really a question of taste. I mean, if all you had was a higher percentage of cacao, what I would do is I would just add a little more sugar when I'm beating it, and that would be fine too. Any other questions? I can tell you this.
Okay,
sorry. Oh,
what about white chocolate?
What about white chocolate? Not in this. White chocolate is 1/3 sugar, 1/3 milk solids, and 1/3 cocoa butter, if it's the real stuff, you know. So all you'd be adding really is a lot of sweetening.
Did we have that with the white chocolate butter cream?
Well, when we made the white chocolate butter cream, we adjusted it by removing these things. When you bake by weight, it gives you so much control over when you change things. So, you know, if you're having like 18 grams of white chocolate, and that means that you have 6 grams of sugar, you just remove 6 grams from the recipe, so you're not over sweetening it. But the cocoa butter is wonderful as an emulsifier. It's the fat that melts the closest to body temperature, so that it gives you that sudden burst and release of flavor the way you do get in a chocolate bar. So the thing is that when you have chocolate like this that's partially melted, you get more of the hit of the chocolate flavor. When you're eating a chocolate bar, you have to let it melt in your mouth before it even tastes like chocolate. That's why ganache, truffles, and lava cake are so luscious. But with a lava cake, you have the texture of the cake, which is soft, and then you have that rush of chocolate from the middle, which I'm really anxious to show you. So now I'm going to set up. Let's see, we have, only 1 minute left before I'm going to check it. That will be the 15-minute mark. And you know, the other day, by mistake, by mistake, I had the oven from something I was testing, a peach kuchen, at 375 instead of 350. And this very rarely happens because I'm always being so careful about temperature. But I wondered why it got done faster, because I checked it at the 14-minute mark. It was already 140 degrees, and I don't want it any higher than 135 Fahrenheit. And to my surprise, it still had flow and it still was delicious, but I really prefer more flow. So the point is that you can't go wrong. If you get within a range, say 130, 135, you will have perfection. And that's where it's so wonderful to have an accurate thermometer. Okay, 22 seconds. Since I'm pretty sure it's going to take 1 more minute, what I'll do is I'll check it right in the oven without taking it out. The rack. You can see when you open it up, it immediately turns on. I also see one is beginning to dip. So that's great because it does mean it's almost done. That's great, it's 1:35. I said it always takes 16 minutes, but that's why I always check a minute early, because always isn't always. There are many factors involved, how long it's been sitting, at what temperature. So now they need to cool for about a minute. I'll set the timer. And I have my plates ready.
Oh, we have a question about the brown oven. Is this on convection?
No, I was afraid that if it was on convection, it's so delicate, it would blow it to one side. So it's 350, just regular. That's a good question.
But the brown oven can do both.
Oh yeah, it can even do super convection. Okay, 23 seconds. I think I can start thinking about turning one over. I'll do the one that was starting to dip. So what I figured out to do with my hands is that I hold one in the palm of my hand on the pot holder, and I put the plate over it. And then I flip it and let it sit for about 10 seconds. So while it's sitting here, I can then do the second one as well. Are you all holding your breath? Okay, so this is the second one. I'll do this one first. And it's easier for me, you could grasp it with one hand, but it's easier for me to lift it slightly with a little spatula. I don't know what you're saying, Woody, so you just better tell me. Oh, closer to me. Okay. Okay. Oops, I've got to grab this now. Not to worry. We're going to fix this. Okay. You can see what a nice side that has, how it's sealed in. Oh, more toward me? Okay. Huh. Naturally, this has never happened to me before, but it's true. Oh. Okay. And now I'll show you how I dust it with sugar. I used to travel not just with my Blue Dot, but with this little tea caddy because it works really well for powdered sugar. One time I forgot it and I was doing a show somewhere in the Midwest. And those are the days when I wore pantyhose. So I actually sacrificed them, cut off the ends, and used my, I used the toe of it to dust it on. It worked perfectly. Okay, so you're saying I should move this, right? Oh, and we're going to have, you know, Woody, he's giving me all these hand signals, not having a clue what he's talking about. Just tell me. Okay, move it back. It's like an airplane, you know, person gives all the rules of how the airplane takes off. And I'm looking like, what is this talking about? All right, so you take up a little of this and then just dust it. And it works, so as you can see, really nicely. And next is the raspberry sauce. Oh, if you want to get out the whipped cream and give me a spoon. Oh, the spoon's right there. Thank you. Okay, you can just do it lightly, but I remember when I studied at Lenotre years ago, they said that chocolate looks sad if it isn't lightened with a little bit of white. Where's the tip? Oh, okay. They never come with tips, so I don't want to lose this one I somehow miraculously got. This is perfect puree, and I have lots of good raspberry sauce recipes, but then I discovered that perfect puree has a frozen concentrated raspberry that's just perfect. And all you have to do is the way I would do when I concentrate my own is to add some lemon juice and some sugar. So I always have some in the freezer. And I like to just do a little bit, but when you give me the whipped cream, what I'll do is I'll show how to spoon it in the center as well. I like whipped cream to be just softly whipped. If you're not decorating with it, it's nicer when it's like that. Actually, if you're going to do whipped cream, it's a good idea to move it slightly, see if it's still movable. Yeah. Okay, and I make a little swoop in it to take the raspberry sauce. To me, this is the most divine combination. And sometimes you'll see that the raspberry sauce causes the whipped cream to kind of get frayed. I mean, it sort of doesn't look perfect and then starts looking white around the edges. That's because the whipped cream isn't as high butterfat content. I like to get, let's see, Organic Valley. What's the other one we often use? It says 6 grams on the side, Stonyfields, 5 grams, and you don't have quite as high butterfat content. Okay, ready for the reveal, as they call it. This is 135, and here it is. You have that lovely flow. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little bit of the whipped cream, a little bit of the cake, a lot of cake. It's really good. Now, what are you moving with your hands? Toward you? Toward the camera? Any questions? How many calories? I haven't a clue. Anyway, I really thank my friends at ThermaWorks, Tim and Howie and Kyle, for doing this wonderful video.
We do have another question.
Oh, okay.
What other toppings would you suggest?
Another thing I love with chocolate is apricot. Pistachio creme anglaise is lovely. And ice cream, even just vanilla. Well, I never think of it as just vanilla because a good vanilla ice cream doesn't get better than that. So I think.
How about caramel?
Oh, caramel. Yeah, well, it could be a little overkill with this because you have the lusciousness of the flow. And I think caramel might be a bit much. So see what I like about the raspberry is that there's acidity to cut some of the richness. And oddly enough, the whipped cream also cuts the richness, even though whipped cream is rich. I don't even put any sugar in the whipped cream. I just want most of the flavor to come from the cake, the lava cake itself, and then the whipped cream is more about texture, and the raspberry is the brightness that gives the good contrast.
Can the cake be cut a little bit more open so we can see more of the inside of it?
Did somebody ask that, or is that you, Woody? Okay, there we are. See, This is a really nice consistency to eat, but if you wanted to just like ook out, I would do 130 instead of 135. It's very hard not to just keep eating this. I hope your mouths are all watery. I hope I don't have chocolate all over my face. When I translated a book called La Passion de Chocolat many years ago, and Papa Bernichon, every day, at the end of the day, he would say kind of somberly, c'est un sale métier. It's a dirty profession, because he always ended up with chocolate on his white chef's coat. Okay, now, Woody wants me to show you this. I have the Panasonic, and by the way, I meant to show you this because this is a Le Creuset magnet, and I often store things to make sure that there are flies or bees, like there was the other day, that they are attracted to sweet. So I store them in one or two of the ovens. And when something's in the oven, I don't want Woody, because it's dark, to go and decide he's going to preheat the oven and cook the plastic or whatever's in it. So I just take this and put it on there right by where I'm turning it on. Same thing with my big oven. I have a little magnet on the thermostat so that if something is heating in there, we don't preheat it to 350 when it's only supposed to be 120. And also, I've checked the different times and temperatures, like with a Breville on convection at 350. They will say if you just turn it off to convection, it will automatically, when you set it at 340 or whatever, automatically go to 350. But I like to determine my temperature by myself. And of course, I always say that ovens are the common denominator of failure. Ergo, they're the major factor for success. And the best way to know that your oven is baking with the right amount of time is to have an accurate oven thermometer. Have I said everything?
Chef alarm.
Chef alarm. Well, that's like the blue dot, right? Okay. Oh, and of course the point and shoot, which is not that one. That's the faux one. I use that maybe more than even the Thermapen. Well, not quite. But the thing is, I'm always looking for what area to store what in. You know, like if I need to raise bread and I want it to be at 80 degrees, I use the point and shoot infrared thermometer to determine what area in my house would be around that. And actually the boiler room, different parts of it are just perfect. So this is it. And I just use it to point and see what temperature various things are. And even when I'm making a sauce, caramel or syrup, I use the infrared to see when I get close to the point, because I don't want to be standing there with the Thermapen holding it the whole time if I don't need to. So just every once in a while I go like this. And then when I'm getting to close to temperature, like with ice cream, 170 to 180, when I get to 160, I switch to this. And this can be set to go off so that you don't just lay it down and then have it stay on. You can have 3 settings, I think it is, one minute that before it goes off, 130 seconds, and one never. I'm not sure, but the thing is that you do have options. So to me, this is a gem. I cannot imagine living without it at this point. The thermometer and the scale are the 2 important things to me in baking. Any more questions? No? Well, if anybody's wondering, Tim had mentioned the Cookie Bible, and that's coming out November 16th in the fall. Oh, Woody has something to say too. I see more hand signals.
The recipe is on our blog.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the recipe I think will also be offered on ThermaWorks blog, or on ThermaWorks site. But we have the recipe, and there'll be also a link so that you can go back to see this again if you can bear it. And it's going to be posted again on our blog, realbakingwithrose.com, this Saturday.
It'll be in the video description of the show too.
It will be in the video description of the show too. Oh, good. Great. Okay, well, thank you all for listening and for coming. And hope you enjoy making this yourself. Oh, let us know. We answer all questions on the blog. And thank you, Tim and Howie and Kyle. I'm turning this back to you now.
That was so fun. Thank you so much, Rose and Woody, for letting us hang out in your kitchen for just a little while. The personality of that kitchen and the expertise that we saw there, that was super fun. I've actually tasted that cake, so I know exactly what it tasted like at the end there. I urge you to try it for yourself with that recipe link and to make sure you get your temperature windows just right. So again, huge props to Rose and Woody for their first YouTube Live. I think they did an amazing job. So fun for us to be able to host them. And thanks for all of you for showing up. Be sure to tune in next week. We will have Jess Pryles and Texas barbecue. She's going to be making some pork tenderloin, actually, with an apple fennel salad. It should be amazing. So next Thursday, 6 p.m. Join us here, and we'll see you then.